Are black men more spiritually advanced, righteous black men than other races and other cultures? This video is just my thoughts and opinions, curiosities. The reason why I say this is because there is a hierarchy of spiritual advancement, spiritual maturity in the believer who has suffered many, many trials and has dedicated their will to the fulfillment of Yahweh's, the God's word in their lives, and how, like, think about it. When you are a commander of a military unit, even a coach of a sports team, but let's start with the commander, then we'll go into the sports metaphors. Sometimes it's good to use metaphors to explain certain points. If you're a commander of a unit and you know you're faced with an opponent or an enemy or a particular fight that is maybe a lot more tougher, more challenging than typical battles, that commander is going to send out their best fighters. If he's a wise strategist, that commander will send out his best fighters, his best soldiers for this battle to meet the complexities and the challenges of this fight. Why send a soldier out who is not as experienced, not as skilled to fight a war or a battle that could overwhelm their skills and could potentially set you and the entire unit up for disaster? Generally, commanders, generals, they pay attention in war strategy what units and their level of experiences match the degree of the fight. So generally commanders, generals, they tend to send out their best soldiers for some of the most toughest fights. And I think of the enemy as sort of like this strategist, this opponent who tends to throw some of his best schemes of manipulation, destruction, and distraction at believers that he knows are the most advanced. You have a sports team. If you know, so for example, NBA, NFL, you're going against a team that highly skilled, highly experienced. You're not going to put players on the floor who are the least experienced. Like for example, with the Lakers, when they were in the playoffs, you didn't see Bronny James in many of these games. The more tighter it got towards the end, you saw him kind of in the beginning, but as things started to wind down, you didn't really see him play as many games because that coach knows I need to put my best players in, people who have the most experience, who can handle this pressure. So I use this metaphor to explain how the spiritual world works. Africans throughout history, African Americans, history has shown that these have been souls who have experienced some of the most toughest fights known to mankind. Even white people, as sophisticated and intelligent as they are, have not been known to suffer some of the conditions and even match the experiences of suffering that African Americans specifically, still experience till this day, even African people. Now, there are other cultures out there who have. So this isn't me saying like, oh, we're the only ones, but just for an example of I'm black, so I can't speak for your race. I can only speak for my people. So let's start the conversation there. So for African Americans, could they be more, advanced, the righteous ones and even the unrighteous who are still on their way there, kind of exercising that muscle, could they be more spiritually advanced? I've noticed when I talk to other cultures and I try to share some of my everyday experiences racially in a dominant white society that tends to be very sensitive and hypersensitive to your race, your culture, how you look. Oh, your hair is too long. Oh, do I got to watch him? Really kind of nuanced everyday existential things that most people will kind of overlook. You find yourself kind of having to, really discern, Is this an environment I really should be in or I can thrive in? My children can thrive because they're picking you out over your hair, things that just really shouldn't be that much of a big deal. You find it as a big deal to certain different cultures. And I'm thinking like, man, why are we so different? Why do we get this treatment? Everybody has hair, everybody has hairstyles. Why is it that the black people tend to get so, ostracized and alienated to where it has to go mainstream about things like their hair and dress? What is this about? And I'm thinking, I'm like, what if black people or are more advanced spiritually than other cultures and other races? Look at our history. Look at the Great Pyramids. Look at all of these different ancient kingdoms and different writing styles and history and just ancient, ancient, ancient history of Black people in this world to the point where cultures who don't share this history, it's up for grabs. We got to put this stuff in our music. It's like it's so advanced where even other cultures who don't share this sort of history, they want to claim it. you know, oh, that was us. That was us that did this. That wasn't you guys. It's really interesting, and I even noticed it's some different cultures, and each culture is different because you might have a person that might be Asian, Hispanic, Indian, white, who may be more advanced in their group, where they may not have the same spiritual level of advancement as maybe the collective. Maybe they might be a little bit far ahead in terms of spiritual discernment and wisdom than even their peers. You'll notice that. And a lot of times those are the ones who tends to get alienated from the group. I noticed that when you're not, the world is a very young, immature, morally corrupt, almost like a baby spiritual world where you could tell the immaturity of the spirit by the advancement and the maturity of the carnal, of the destruction, of the selfishness, of the lust. It's almost like the more advanced they are materially and um almost like this physicality, dark, destructive, area of life, the more immature they are spiritually. In some cultures, can't even hold a space for Black people, their stories, their histories, even the everyday realities that we're still struggling with. They get so radio reactive. Oh, I don't want to hear that. Oh, I don't. Oh, I don't. But if you're a spiritually advanced people, and as a lot of these cultures claim themselves to be, because sometimes people will try to measure their spiritual advancement and maturity through how many things they possess. Well, I have all this money. Look at all these cars I have. Look at the location I live. Look at all this stuff I have access to. I'm advanced. I'm better than you. Is that really a measure of spiritual advancement, spiritual maturity? A lot of times, those things can hold you back, and really the key, and not even just the key, but a main element or qualifier in a lot of ways to the degree of your spiritual or even an indicator of your spirituality and advancement spiritually is suffering. And it's really weird because to the human mind, the logical mind, it's like, what, Randy, what do you mean suffering is a marker of a spiritually advanced soul? Because the greatest and the most difficult fights are only given to the greatest and the most sort of advanced soldiers. And you better believe there's an agenda from the enemy on certain people who he is just so desperate to send to hell. The enemy is active. There are people that I don't want to get into heaven. There are people who I don't want to win. I don't want them to know themselves. So here I am. And who better to send in this fight than a soul collective that is mentally, spiritually advanced and able to take on this fight? I would believe that some souls are like, I don't want any part of this fight. I just want to be comfortable. I want to enjoy the luxuries of this world and die. Just leave me alone. But that doesn't advance and further the agenda of the spiritual maturation of the people and the collective towards the alignment of God's will and his word. There are verses in the Bible that speak to the different levels of spiritual maturity in the human race. We have here Hebrews 5:12 through 14. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first principles. Here, the author is like, man, after all this time, You guys have been around, hanging around after all these things you've experienced, after all these things you've witnessed, even through other people's, even if not through yourself, just the things that you've observed. You kind of been around. And by now, you should be a teacher. After a certain time, a soul is on earth and has accumulated enough experience and wisdom spiritually, mentally, they should be able to transmute that knowledge to other people. That marks the advancement of a mature soul. That is sort of like the threshold for elderhood. You know, I'm about to be 40, I'm 35, I'm 30. Kind of went through the teenage years, the young, the 20s. I've kind of seen what that's about. I worked hard, I've kind of earned my spot. Maybe I can sort of guide other people into what to look out for. There comes a level of sort of maturation that comes with teaching. They're kind of inseparable. It's like once you find yourself becoming mature in certain areas, you teach. Okay. You see this in the workforce, employees who've been on the field, been around the company, been in the work for a long time. These tend to be, what are supervisors? What are managers? In a lot of ways, they're educators, right? Hey, this is how it's done. They may have a certain level of knowledge of policies and insights in the company that a lot of the lower level employees don't have. So it's their responsibility to sort of bring this particular group up to speed, educate, teach them. So a mark of a soul's maturity generally comes with teaching. But there's a lot of things that can't be taught from different cultures and different groups that Black people specifically can speak to. For example, if you're dealing with a younger African American or a younger Black person who suffered years of oppression, years of systemic racism, feel like, they're at the bottom and they can't get up, they're having a lot of different struggles and psychological struggles, they're more than likely not trying to listen to a white person about how to get out of this situation. Now, does that mean that they don't have wisdom and knowledge? White people don't come with some sort of like knowledge that can be useful? Absolutely. But they might want to get that knowledge from someone who shares this experience. That's key. And I noticed that as a counselor when I'm working with different cultures and different groups, a lot of times they'll seek me out because they may believe, well, he's African American. His people have experienced years and years of oppression, years and years of challenges and obstacles and different things like that. And they're still surviving. And think about it too, like what other group can you speak of that has sort of survived years and years of just strategic, you know, oppression against their people, against their communities, against their advancement, and still survive? You mean to tell me Black people are still dominating in a lot of different fields like sports, like, and these different fields may not be important to you, but you even got Black people who are creating gasoline out of plastics, right? They have these scientific, bright minds just like everybody else. And you mean to tell me these are people that essentially were kept from even being able to read and can still graduate in massive numbers, can still be successful, can still be billionaires and millionaires despite all this oppression. So, and sometimes some different cultures, depending on where they come from and their particular level of spiritual maturity, they can't sit with even hearing your story as a Black person. You might just go talk to them about just your everyday realities, and they're just like, oh, no, no, that can't exist. No, I couldn't deal with that. I don't think a lot of different cultures could really walk in our shoes, to be honest, even just for a week. I think they couldn't stomach it. And I noticed like some of these other cultures are so immature spiritually, they don't even want to tolerate the idea of any sort of unnecessary stress or suffering. They want to be suffer free. And essentially that creates this bubble of a comfort zone where in a lot of ways spiritually you you put yourself at a disadvantage. Now, I'm not saying you need to go bleed through and just kind of throw your life away with just senseless, destructive acts. However, some of the best soldiers, some of the most skilled sailors develop that state off of some of the most troubled waters, is kind of where I'm going. And if all you're looking for is smooth seas, what good are you to your brother who needs a soldier that has been in this fight, who has been winning, who had struggles? Struggle isn't always necessarily a bad thing. So when you should have been teachers by now, you still need others to kind of teach you the first principles. We still kind of go have to go back to the beginning of, Adam and Eve. This is what happened. This is what it means to be good. This is what it means to be bad. And a lot of times, these be some of your souls who have the most resources, who still need to be taught the basic principles of what it means to do the right thing. So just because you have a lot of wealth, just because you have a lot of access to resources, just because on the outside looking in, it looks like you have it all, it doesn't mean that's an indicator that you're the most spiritually advanced or the most spiritually mature. So it says here, for though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again. See, so that means not only did we have to teach you the first time, we got to keep going through this over and over and over and over again with you. Okay, the first principles, but solid food belongs to those who are of full age. Okay, solid food again is sort of like a metaphor or a symbol for some of the more advanced spirituality. Okay, whether that's expressed through teaching, symbols, understandings. That's what solid food, essentially means here. In that, for those who are of full age. So here it's telling you, you got some who are babes, and then you got some who are of full age here. The passage shows different levels of spiritual maturity, contrasting spiritual infancy with developed discernment. First Corinthians 3 1 through 3. I could not speak to you as to spiritual people, but as to carnal, as to babes in Christ. All right. Philippians 3:12 through 15. Not that I have already attained or am already perfected. Therefore, let us, as many as are mature, have this mind. Ephesians 4:11 through 15, till we all come to the unity of the faith, unto a perfect man, unto the measure of the stature of the fullness of Christ. First John 2:12 through 14, I write unto you, little children, young men, and fathers. Okay, that's a spiritual metaphor for just the advancement in the different stages of spiritual maturity here. Then we have Matthew 13 through 23, some a hundredfold, some 60, some 30. Okay, though all receive the word, people produce fruit at different levels, depending on spiritual depth and receptivity. Second Timothy 2:20 through 21. In a great house, there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay. This passage just suggests that purification, obedience, and holiness affect how greatly a person is used spiritually by God. And I thought about it. I'm like, all this suffering, challenge, and obstacles was not for nothing. It produced a very sophisticated, intelligent, knowledgeable, articulate Black man, especially the ones who extract from these experiences righteousness and alignment with their creator in this world. They tend to be a lot more advanced spiritually. And this is why a lot of different cultures don't understand you, where they don't want to be around you. And a lot of times you have to kind of dumb down your spirituality and your maturity in order to kind of belong and to fit in. Because if you're too advanced, if you understand scriptures, if you can see sort of the nuances in human social conditioning and social engineering, and you see it so much to where it overwhelms you psychologically, where you have advanced souls where they see and have that eye of the seer and that perceptive ability of things that a lot of human beings kind of overlook, because the material world is a very dark, dense, sort of dumbed down, go with the flow, keep your mouth shut sort of program. It's a system, it's like a machine. And not everybody is aligned with that sort of order of the day. So you'll find a lot of times these are the souls that have depression, have anxiety, because they're carrying such a heavy weight of wisdom internally that completely contradicts the order of the day, and they don't know who to express it to. Because then if you go to your family, if they're a part of the wagon, then they're going to shun you out. If you try to go to your friends and they're a part of the system, they're like, hey man, shut that shit up, come over here and get drunk, get high, spend some of this money, go get some ass, then they're going to feel even more isolated. And that's what the world is kind of becoming. That's where I feel like the United States is starting to kind of grow towards a very dark, dense, carnal economy, where spirituality, truth, compassion, knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, these things are starting to become like buried treasures. And people are in a state of an exodus where they're like, we got to get the hell up out of here. People who tend to be a little bit more spiritually advanced, more discerned. Because what will happen is the Lord is if He's in our souls and our spirit, you'll have a certain sense of just unfulfillment in you over time. You might think mentally, oh, I'm just going to go along to get along. I'm making good money. I have a pretty good lifestyle. I don't really have that much complaints. Why break something that's not fixed? Like, why fix something that's not broken? However, deep inside your inner spirit and your soul, something will kind of nudge at you. And no matter how much more money you make, no matter how much more relationships or women that you get, you'll still feel like unfulfilled. There'll be a part of you that's just like, damn, man, this isn't, I just don't feel complete. I just don't feel whole. And you know why? Because you're not in an environment that facilitates the growth and acknowledgement and the validation of your spiritual maturity in contrast to the environment that you're in. And sometimes people will keep it to themselves. On the outside looking in, it looks like everything is all right. That's why when you're asking your friends or certain people, like, hey, how you doing? You might notice perceptive wise that something's not right, but I'm like, everything's all right, man. I'm good. And these are a lot of times are the people who end up doing extreme things to themselves because they don't feel like they have a voice or they have an environment or the people who they really want to acknowledge and validate them just don't have it. This spirituality thing is really deep. It's a very deep, subtle conversation that it's not easy for most people to communicate or orate. So that's why a lot of people just don't want to have anything to do with the conversation at all. And it also takes a special person to be able to even be worthy of having this communication. So, could black men, righteous black men, be more spiritually advanced than other cultures and other races? Could this explain why there's so much pressure and resistance to sort of like the development and the advancement of this particular special group? I think so. These are just my opinions. These are just my thoughts. Are we the only culture or the other only race that is blessed with these gifts? Absolutely not. Just for the sake of the conversation. Hope you guys stay blessed up. Have a blessed week.